Margaret Thompson returned to the ceremony area with news that would forever change how everyone present understood the meaning of honor and community. Colonel Harrison was waiting with barely concealed anticipation, while the airport workers stood in nervous silence, still unsure whether their spontaneous gesture had been appropriate. "The family has approved your suggestion, Colonel," Margaret Thompson announced. They would be honored to have the airport workers participate in the ceremony. A ripple of emotion passed through the gathered workers. Sarah Mitchell felt her breath catch in her throat. Elena Rodriguez blinked back tears. Marcus Chun stood straighter, understanding that he was about to become part of something profoundly significant. Tom Bradley, the youngest among them, felt a responsibility settle on his shoulders that he had never experienced before. Colonel Harrison nodded with satisfaction. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Now, if I may address the workers directly." He turned toward the group of airport employees, his military bearing commanding immediate attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have been invited by the Williams family to participate as honor guards in the ceremony for their son, Sergeant David Williams, who died serving in Afghanistan." The weight of the moment settled over everyone present. This wasn't just about standing respectfully at a distance anymore. They were being asked to take an active role in welcoming home a fallen soldier. "This is not a responsibility to take lightly," Colonel Harrison continued. "You will be representing not just yourselves, but the civilian community that Sergeant Williams died protecting. You will be showing his family that their son's sacrifice was appreciated by the people he served." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sir, what exactly would you need us to do?" Colonel Harrison smiled at her directness. "Form 2 lines along the path from the aircraft to the hearse. Stand at attention when the honor guard carries the coffin. Remove any hats or caps when the flag passes by. Maintain silence during the formal proceedings. That's all. Your presence and your respect are what matter." Sarah Mitchell looked around at her colleagues. She saw determination mixed with nervousness, pride mixed with uncertainty. These were people accustomed to physical work, to solving practical problems, to getting things done efficiently. But this required something different: the ability to represent the best of civilian society in a moment of profound solemnity. "We'll do our best, sir," Sarah said simply. Colonel Harrison began organizing the modified ceremony. His royal guards would still perform their traditional roles, but now they would be joined by a civilian honor guard composed of airport workers. It was unprecedented, but it felt absolutely right. The airport workers formed 2 lines as directed, creating a pathway that extended from the aircraft to where the hearse was waiting. They stood in their work clothes, their faces serious with the weight of their new responsibility. There was no uniform appearance among them, but there was something powerful in their diversity and their shared commitment to honoring someone they had never met. Margaret Thompson watched the formation with a mixture of pride and amazement. In her years of managing airport operations, she had seen her employees handle emergencies, deal with difficult passengers, work through weather delays, and manage countless challenges. But she had never seen them transformed in quite this way. The Royal Guard took their positions alongside the airport workers, creating an honor guard that represented both military tradition and civilian respect. The contrast between the Guard's perfect uniforms and the workers' practical clothing somehow enhanced rather than diminished the dignity of the ceremony. Colonel Harrison gave a signal, and the aircraft doors opened. The formal ceremony began with the precision and solemnity that military protocols demanded, but it was now infused with something additional: the authentic respect of working people who understood that freedom and security came at a cost. The Williams family watched from their designated area as the coffin, draped in the Union Jack, was carefully carried from the aircraft. Catherine Williams found herself focusing not just on her son's coffin, but on the faces of the airport workers who lined the pathway. She saw genuine emotion, sincere respect, and a kind of solidarity that touched her deeply. As the honor guard carried Sergeant David Williams' coffin between the lines of Royal Guards and airport workers, something remarkable happened. The airport workers didn't just stand silently as instructed. They began to remove their hats and caps in a wave that followed the coffin's progress, creating a visual representation of respect that was both spontaneous and deeply moving. Marcus Chin felt tears on his cheeks as the flag-draped coffin passed by him. He thought about his own journey to Britain, the opportunities he had found, the life he had been able to build. The young man in that coffin had died protecting the kind of society that made such opportunities possible. Elena Rodriguez, who had seen many difficult moments in her 15 years at the airport, found this one of the most profound. She thought about her own children, about the world they were growing up in, about the people who made sacrifices to protect that world. The ceremony had become personal for her in a way she hadn't expected. Tom Bradley, standing at attention in his work clothes among royal guards in ceremonial uniform, felt the weight of representing his generation. He was the same age as Sergeant Williams had been, facing the same kinds of choices about career, service, and responsibility. The ceremony was showing him something about the seriousness of those choices. Sarah Mitchell watched the coffin pass and thought about leadership, about the responsibility she felt for her team, about the different kinds of service that people could provide to their community. She realized that this moment was changing how she understood her own work and her own role in society. The formal military honors proceeded with perfect precision. The Royal Guards performed their ancient drill with flawless execution, their movements sharp and precise, their bearing absolutely correct. But the presence of the airport workers had added something that no military manual could have provided: the authentic response of the people for whom the sacrifice had been made. Colonel Harrison found himself deeply moved by the sight of military precision combined with civilian sincerity. In his 30 years of service, he had participated in many ceremonies, but this one felt different. It felt more complete, more representative of what military service was supposed to accomplish. As the ceremony continued, other airport workers who had not been part of the original group began to appear at the edges of the area. Word had spread through the terminals and work areas that something extraordinary was happening at Gate 12. Pilots, flight attendants, customs officers, retail workers, and administrative staff found reasons to be in the vicinity. The expanded audience created an atmosphere that was both formal and communal. This was no longer just a military ceremony or a family memorial. It had become a community event, a moment when people from all walks of life came together to acknowledge sacrifice and express gratitude. Margaret Thompson noticed the growing crowd and felt a surge of pride in her employees and colleagues. These people had chosen to interrupt their work, to step away from their normal responsibilities, to participate in something larger than their individual concerns. The ceremony reached its climax as the coffin was placed in the hearse. Colonel Harrison delivered the traditional words of commitment and honor, but his speech was enriched by the knowledge that he was speaking not just to the family and military personnel, but to a broader community that had chosen to be present. Catherine Williams approached the coffin for her final goodbye, and, as she did, she noticed that the airport workers maintained their respectful silence and attention. These strangers were giving her son the same honor that his military comrades provided, and that meant more to her than she could have imagined. Robert Williams placed his hand on the flag covering his son's coffin and spoke quietly to the assembled group. David would have been proud to see this. He believed in serving ordinary people, and seeing ordinary people honor his service would have meant everything to him. Amy Williams looked around at the faces of the workers and saw something that she would remember for the rest of her life. She saw people who had been touched by her brother's story, who had chosen to make his sacrifice part of their own understanding of community and responsibility. As the hearse prepared to leave for the final journey, Colonel Harrison addressed the airport workers one more time. "You have participated in something unprecedented today. You have shown that honor and respect are not limited to military personnel or government officials. You have demonstrated that the best of civilian society understands and appreciates the cost of freedom." Elena Rodriguez spoke for the group. "Sir, thank you for allowing us to be part of this. We'll never forget Sergeant Williams or what he gave for our country." The hearse departed, followed by the family and the Royal Guard escort. The formal ceremony was over, but the airport workers remained in their positions for several minutes, unwilling to immediately return to their normal activities. Sarah Mitchell looked around at her team and her colleagues from other departments. She saw that they had all been changed by the experience. They would return to their regular jobs, but with a different understanding of what their work meant, of how their service to the traveling public was connected to larger questions of community and citizenship. The crowd of workers gradually began to disperse, but slowly and thoughtfully. Conversations started quietly, people sharing their feelings about what they had just experienced. There was no rushing back to work, no immediate return to the normal bustle of airport operations. Margaret Thompson approached Sarah's team as they prepared to resume their duties. "I want you all to know how proud I am of what happened here today. You represented this airport and our entire community with dignity and grace." Marcus Chin shook hands with Tom Bradley and Elena Rodriguez. They had started the day as co-workers, but they were ending it as people who had shared something profound. The spontaneous respect they had shown had evolved into something much more significant. Over the following days, word of the ceremony spread beyond the airport. Local newspapers picked up the story, describing how airport workers had interrupted their normal duties to honor a fallen soldier and had been invited to participate in the formal ceremony. The story touched people across the country who saw in it something positive about human nature and community values. The Williams family received hundreds of letters and messages from people who had been moved by the account of the ceremony. Many of them mentioned how meaningful it was to know that ordinary working people had chosen to honor their son's sacrifice. Colonel Harrison included the Manchester Airport ceremony in his reports to military headquarters, describing it as one of the most moving tributes he had ever witnessed. The idea of including civilian participants in repatriation ceremonies began to be discussed at higher levels of military planning. For the airport workers themselves, the experience became a defining moment in their understanding of work and service. Sarah Mitchell found that her team approached their daily responsibilities with a heightened sense of purpose, understanding that their work was part of a larger social framework that depended on mutual respect and responsibility. Elena Rodriguez began volunteering with military family support organizations, wanting to continue the connection she had felt during the ceremony. Marcus Chin started attending citizenship classes, inspired by the experience to formalize his commitment to his adopted country. Tom Bradley began considering military service himself, influenced by his participation in honoring someone who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The ceremony had lasted only an hour, but its impact would continue for years. It had shown that respect and honor could cross boundaries of profession, class, and background. It had demonstrated that the best human responses to sacrifice and loss are often spontaneous and authentic rather than formally planned. Most importantly, it had proven that ordinary people, doing ordinary jobs, possessed an extraordinary capacity for recognizing what truly matters and responding with grace and dignity when faced with profound loss and genuine heroism. The morning had begun with routine airport operations and ended with a redefinition of what community and honor could mean when people chose to see beyond their immediate responsibilities to something larger and more important than themselves. The moment of silence that followed the aircraft's arrival stretched across the tarmac like a blanket of reverence. Sarah Mitchell watched as the Royal Guard commander, Colonel James Harrison, stepped forward to begin the formal ceremony. His uniform was perfect, his posture commanded absolute respect, and his face carried the weight of having performed this solemn duty many times before. But, as Colonel Harrison raised his sword to signal the beginning of the ceremony, something unexpected began to happen among the airport workers who had gathered at the edges of the area. Elena Rodriguez, the veteran ground crew member, was the first to remove her reflective safety vest. Without saying a word, she folded it carefully and held it against her chest. The gesture was instinctive, born from a deep understanding of the gravity of the moment. Marcus Chin noticed Elena's action and, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. Then, Tom Bradley followed suit. One by one, the members of Sarah's crew removed their vests in a spontaneous show of respect that had nothing to do with airport protocol and everything to do with human dignity. The gesture spread through the crowd of workers like a gentle wave. Maintenance workers removed their work caps, baggage handlers took off their gloves, security officers stood straighter, and cleaning staff clutched their equipment with newfound solemnity. Within moments, Over 60 airport employees had transformed from a casual gathering into something resembling an honor guard themselves. Colonel Harrison noticed the change in the crowd of workers. His trained eye, accustomed to military precision and protocol, recognized something significant happening. He paused in his movements and turned slightly to observe the airport employees more carefully. What he saw surprised him. These weren't military personnel following orders or civilians awkwardly trying to imitate military customs. These were working people expressing genuine respect in their own authentic way. Their posture wasn't militarily perfect, but it was heartfelt. Their gestures weren't formally trained, but they came from a place of sincere honor. Sarah Mitchell felt her heart racing as she realized that her team's simple gesture had sparked something much larger. She looked around at the faces of her fellow workers and saw something she had never seen before during their regular work days. These people, who spent their time moving luggage and cleaning floors and fixing equipment, were standing with a dignity that transformed them from airport employees into representatives of something greater. The fallen soldier's family noticed the change in the crowd as well. Mrs. Catherine Williams, the soldier's mother, had been steeling herself for the formal military ceremony, trying to prepare emotionally for the moment when she would see her son's flag-draped coffin. But the sight of dozens of airport workers showing such spontaneous respect brought tears to her eyes in a way that surprised her. Her husband, Robert Williams, a retired teacher who had supported his son's decision to join the military despite his own concerns, felt a surge of emotion that he hadn't expected. He had been prepared for the formal honors, the military precision, and the official recognition of his son's sacrifice. But this unplanned display of respect from ordinary working people touched something deeper in his heart. Their daughter, Amy Williams, who was a nurse and had always been the practical member of the family, found herself deeply moved by the genuine nature of the worker's gesture. She had been focused on supporting her parents through the ceremony, but now she felt supported by the presence of these strangers who had chosen to honor her brother in their own way. Colonel Harrison made a decision that went against his training in formal military protocol. Instead of proceeding immediately with the planned ceremony, he turned toward the crowd of airport workers and did something unprecedented. He walked over to where Sarah Mitchell and her team were standing. "Ma'am," he said to Sarah, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. "I'm Colonel Harrison, commanding this honor guard detail." Sarah felt a moment of panic. Had they done something wrong? Were they interfering with the ceremony? "I'm sorry, sir, if we're in the way. We can move further back." Colonel Harrison shook his head. "You're not in the way. What you and your colleagues are doing here is remarkable. In 30 years of military service, I've seen many ceremonies, but I've never seen such a spontaneous display of respect from civilians." He looked around at the gathered airport workers, taking in their faces, their posture, their obvious sincerity. These soldiers die for freedom, for democracy, for the idea that ordinary people deserve to live their lives with dignity and opportunity. When I see ordinary people like yourselves choosing to honor that sacrifice, it reminds me why we serve. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward slightly. "Sir, we just felt it was right. When someone gives their life for their country, it seems like the least we can do is show some respect." Colonel Harrison nodded. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Elena Rodriguez, sir. I've been working here 15 years. "And you?" he asked, turning to Marcus Chun. "Marcus Chun, sir. I'm originally from Hong Kong." Colonel Harrison's expression softened even further. "Mr. Chun, the fact that you've chosen to honor a British soldier, that you see his sacrifice as worthy of your respect despite coming from somewhere else entirely, that speaks to the best of what we're supposed to be fighting for." The conversation was drawing attention from other parts of the ceremony area. Airport officials who had been coordinating the logistics of the event began to notice that the military commander was speaking with the ground crew. Some of them started to approach, unsure whether this was part of the planned ceremony or an unexpected development. Margaret Thompson, the airport's general manager, hurried over to the group. She was a capable administrator who took pride in running an efficient facility, but she was also concerned about any deviations from the planned ceremony that might upset the grieving family or interfere with the military protocols. "Colonel Harrison," she said as she approached, "is everything proceeding according to schedule?" Colonel Harrison turned to face her. Miss Thompson, I presume? We spoke on the phone yesterday about the arrangements. Yes, sir. Is there a problem with the ceremony setup? Colonel Harrison gestured toward the crowd of airport workers. No problem at all. In fact, I'd like to suggest a modification to our ceremony, if the family agrees. Margaret Thompson looked confused. Military ceremonies were planned down to the minute, with every movement choreographed and every participant's role clearly defined. What kind of modifications, sir? I'd like to invite these airport workers to participate more formally in the honor guard ceremony. The suggestion created a moment of stunned silence among everyone within earshot. Margaret Thompson's first instinct was concern about protocol, insurance liability, and the potential for something to go wrong. But, as she looked around at the faces of her employees, she saw something that made her reconsider. Sarah Mitchell spoke up. Sir, we don't want to interfere with anything. We're not trained for military ceremonies. You don't need military training to show respect, Colonel Harrison replied. What you need is exactly what you've already demonstrated. Genuine care for someone who gave their life in service. Tom Bradley, the youngest member of Sarah's crew, couldn't contain his curiosity. Sir, what would we be asked to do? Colonel Harrison smiled slightly. Stand at attention during the ceremony. Remove your hats when the coffin is carried past. Maintain silence during the formal proceedings. Exactly what you've been doing, but as official participants rather than observers. The idea was unprecedented. Military honor guard ceremonies typically involved only trained military personnel, family members, and official representatives of government or military organizations. Including civilian airport workers would be a significant departure from standard protocol. But, as Colonel Harrison looked around at the gathering, he saw something that convinced him it was the right thing to do. These weren't random civilians who had wandered over out of curiosity. These were people who worked hard every day to keep the infrastructure of society functioning. They represented the kind of people that soldiers fought to protect. Margaret Thompson realized that the decision wasn't really hers to make. Colonel, this would need to be approved by the family. It's their ceremony. Colonel Harrison nodded. Of course. Would you be willing to approach them with the suggestion? As Margaret Thompson walked toward the family area to discuss the unprecedented request, the airport workers waited in nervous anticipation. None of them had expected to become participants in a military ceremony. They had simply wanted to show respect. Elena Rodriguez spoke quietly to her fellow workers. Whatever happens, I'm proud of what we did here. We showed that working people understand sacrifice and honor. Marcus Chun was thinking about his own journey to Britain, the opportunities he had found, the life he had been able to build. The idea that he might be able to participate in honoring someone who had died protecting those opportunities felt deeply meaningful. Sarah Mitchell was worried about the responsibility. What if they made a mistake during the ceremony? What if their lack of military training caused problems? But she was also moved by the possibility of being able to do more than just watch from a distance. Margaret Thompson reached the family area where the Williams family was waiting for the ceremony to begin. She approached them with some uncertainty, unsure how they would react to such an unusual request. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Williams, she said gently. I'm Margaret Thompson, the general manager of the airport. I hope everything has been arranged to your satisfaction. Catherine Williams, the soldier's mother, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Yes, everyone has been very kind and respectful. There's been an unexpected development that I need to discuss with you. It's completely your choice, and there's no pressure either way. Robert Williams straightened up. What kind of development? Margaret Thompson explained about the airport workers, their spontaneous gesture of respect, and Colonel Harrison's suggestion that they be included as participants in the ceremony. The family exchanged glances, processing this unexpected option. They had been prepared for a formal military ceremony with specific participants and procedures. The idea of including airport workers was something none of them had considered. Amy Williams, the soldier's sister, was the first to speak. These are people who didn't even know David, but they want to honor him anyway? Yes, Margaret Thompson replied. They stopped their regular work to show respect. Colonel Harrison says he's never seen anything quite like it. Catherine Williams thought about her son, about his character, about what he would have wanted. David Williams had joined the military not because he came from a military family, but because he believed in serving something larger than himself. He had often talked about fighting for ordinary people, for the right of working people to live their lives in peace and dignity. How many airport workers are we talking about? Robert Williams asked. Margaret Thompson looked back toward the ceremony area. About 60, from what I can see. Ground crew, maintenance staff, security officers, cleaning personnel. People from all over the airport. Catherine Williams wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. David always said he was fighting for people like that. Working people. People who get up every morning and do jobs that keep society functioning. She looked at her husband and daughter, seeing in their faces the same mixture of surprise and emotion that she was feeling. If they want to honor our son, if a military colonel thinks it's appropriate, then I think David would be proud to have them participate. Robert Williams nodded. David would have liked this. He never thought much of himself as a hero. He would have been honored to know that ordinary working people saw his sacrifice as worth respecting. Amy Williams squeezed her mother's hand. Let's do it. Let's make this ceremony about more than just formal protocol. Let's make it about the kind of community David believed in. Margaret Thompson felt a surge of pride in her employees and relief that the family was open to the unusual arrangement. I'll let Colonel Harrison know that you approve of the modification. As she walked back toward the ceremony area, Margaret Thompson realized that she was about to witness something unprecedented in her 20-year career in airport management. A formal military ceremony was about to become something much more inclusive and meaningful than anyone had planned. The airport workers continued to wait, unaware that their simple gesture of respect was about to transform them from observers into participants in one of the most moving ceremonies any of them would ever experience. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Manchester Airport as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her reflective vest and checked her radio one more time. She had been working as a ground crew supervisor for 8 years, and today felt different. The usual bustle of passengers, luggage carts, and aircraft engines created their familiar symphony, but there was an underlying tension in the air that she couldn't quite place. Sarah's team of 12 baggage handlers and ground crew workers had gathered for their morning briefing in the small concrete building that served as their break room. The walls were covered with safety notices, work schedules, and a few faded photos of company events. Coffee cups steamed in the early morning chill as the team prepared for what they thought would be another ordinary day. Listen up, everyone, Sarah called out, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of managing busy airport operations. We've got a full schedule today. Terminal 2 is expecting heavy traffic, and we need to stay sharp. Weather looks good, so no delays expected. Among her team was Marcus Chun, a 28-year-old baggage handler who had immigrated from Hong Kong 5 years earlier. He was known for his careful attention to detail and his ability to spot problems before they became serious issues. Next to him sat Elena Rodriguez, a veteran ground crew member who had worked at the airport for 15 years and had seen everything from emergency landings to celebrity arrivals. Any special flights coming in today? Asked Tom Bradley, the newest member of their team. At 19, he was eager to learn and always asked questions that showed his genuine interest in doing the job right. Sarah glanced at her clipboard, scanning through the morning's flight manifest. Nothing out of the ordinary. Standard passenger flights, some cargo, and she paused, noticing a notation she had missed earlier. Actually, there's a military transport coming in around 11. Repatriation flight. The room fell quiet. Everyone on the ground crew understood what that meant. When Sarah said repatriation flight, she was talking about a fallen soldier coming home. These flights were handled with special protocols, extra care, and the highest level of respect. The whole airport would know about it, from security to customs to the airline staff. Elena Rodriguez shifted in her chair. She had handled several repatriation flights over her 15 years at the airport, and they never got easier. Do we know any details? She asked softly. Sarah shook her head. Just that it's scheduled for Gate 12, and there will be a Royal Guard escort. The family will be present for the ceremony. Marcus Chun had never worked a repatriation flight before. He had heard about them from other crew members, but this would be his first time being part of such a solemn occasion. What exactly do we need to do differently? He asked. Everything stops, Elena explained, her voice carrying the weight of experience. When that aircraft arrives, all ground operations in the immediate area pause. We show respect. No loud machinery, no rushing around, no casual conversation. The royal guard will perform their ceremony, the family will have their moment, and we stay back and stay quiet. Sarah nodded in agreement. It's not just about following protocol. It's about understanding that we're witnessing something sacred. A family is receiving their loved one for the last time. A soldier is coming home. The team spent the next hour going through their regular morning routine. They checked equipment, reviewed safety procedures, and began handling the first wave of incoming flights. But the knowledge of what was coming at 11 o'clock hung over everything they did. By 9:30, word had spread throughout the airport. The terminal managers had briefed their staff, security had adjusted their schedules, and even the retail workers in the shops had been informed. When a repatriation flight arrived, the entire airport became part of the ceremony, whether directly involved or not. Sarah's radio crackled to life as she supervised the unloading of a flight from Dublin. Ground control to Crew 7, please respond. Crew 7 here, Sarah replied, stepping away from the noise of the baggage conveyor. Sarah, we need you and your team to clear the area around Gate 12 by 10:45. Military transport is arriving on schedule. Royal Guard escort will be in position by 10:30. Understood. We'll have the area cleared and ready. She gathered her team and explained the timeline. They would finish their current assignments and then position themselves at a respectful distance from Gate 12. Their job would be to ensure that no ground operations interfered with the ceremony while being available to assist if needed. At 10:15, Sarah noticed the first signs of the special arrangements. A group of men in the distinctive red tunics and tall black bearskin hats of the Royal Guard were walking across the tarmac toward Gate 12. Even from a distance, their precise movements and military bearing commanded respect. Marcus Chin watched the Royal Guard with fascination. He had seen them in photographs and on television, but never in person. Their uniforms were immaculate, their posture perfect, and they moved with a synchronization that spoke of countless hours of training and tradition. They trained for this their entire careers, Elena told him quietly. Those guards aren't just for show. They're active duty soldiers who earn the right to serve in ceremonial units. When they perform a repatriation ceremony, they're honoring one of their own. The Royal Guard took their positions near Gate 12, forming two precise lines that would create a corridor of honor for the fallen soldier. Their commanding officer, a tall man with decades of experience written in the lines of his face, checked his watch and spoke quietly into his radio. At 10:30, Sarah's team had finished clearing the area and positioned themselves about 50 yards away from Gate 12. They could see the ceremony preparations, but were far enough away to avoid any interference. Other airport workers had gathered at similar distances, creating a silent audience of people who worked at the airport every day, but rarely witnessed something this profound. The family arrived at 10:40. Sarah could see them being escorted by airport officials and what appeared to be military liaison officers. Even from a distance, the weight of their grief was visible in their posture, their careful movements, and the way they held on to each other for support. Tom Bradley, the youngest member of Sarah's team, felt his throat tighten as he watched the family take their positions. He had never experienced loss like this, and seeing it unfold in front of him made the reality of sacrifice suddenly very personal. The military transport aircraft appeared on the horizon exactly on schedule. It was a large, gray aircraft that looked different from the commercial planes that usually use the airport. As it approached the runway, even the normal airport noise seemed to diminish, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. Sarah checked her radio to make sure it was turned down low. Her team stood quietly, watching as the aircraft touched down and began its approach to Gate 12. The precision of the landing, the careful way the pilot brought the aircraft to exactly the right position, spoke to the importance of what was happening. The Royal Guard snapped to attention as the aircraft's engines wound down. Their movements were sharp, precise, and filled with the kind of respect that can only come from understanding the true cost of military service. The commanding officer raised his sword in salute as the aircraft came to a complete stop. Ground crew members who weren't part of Sarah's team had also stopped their work to watch. Baggage handlers stood beside their carts, maintenance workers paused in their tasks, and even passengers in nearby terminal windows had noticed that something significant was happening. The aircraft door opened, and airport officials began the careful process of preparing for the ceremony. Sarah's team watched as the specialized equipment needed for such occasions was brought into position. Everything moved with deliberate care and respect. Elena Rodriguez had seen this ceremony several times before, but it never failed to move her. She thought about her own family, her own sons, and the families who made sacrifices that most people would never fully understand. Marcus Chin found himself thinking about the soldier inside the aircraft. He wondered about their story, their family, their dreams, and the circumstances that had led to this moment. The ceremony was about more than protocol or tradition. It was about a human being who had given everything in service to their country. As the Royal Guard prepared to begin their formal ceremony, Sarah noticed something unexpected happening around the edges of the tarmac. Ground crew workers from other teams were quietly moving closer. Not close enough to interfere, but close enough to show their respect. Tom Bradley saw it too. "Look," he whispered to his teammates, pointing toward the maintenance hangars. "More workers are coming." Indeed, airport employees from across the facility were quietly gathering at the edges of the ceremonial area. Mechanics, security officers, cleaning staff, and administrative workers had all found reasons to be near Gate 12 at 11 o'clock. None of them had been invited to participate in the ceremony, but all of them felt compelled to be present. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her fellow workers. These were people who came to work every day to keep the airport running, to handle luggage, to clean floors, to fix equipment. They weren't military personnel, they weren't government officials, and they weren't family members. But they understood that something important was happening, and they wanted to show their respect in the only way they could. The Royal Guard commander noticed the gathering crowd of airport workers. He exchanged glances with his fellow officers, and Sarah could see them having a brief, quiet conversation. She wondered if they were concerned about the additional people present or if they understood the spirit in which the workers had come. As 11 o'clock approached, the final preparations for the ceremony were completed. The Royal Guard stood at perfect attention. The family was positioned where they could participate fully in the honoring of their loved one, and the aircraft was ready for the solemn process of repatriation. But the unexpected presence of so many airport workers had created a moment that no one had planned for. The formal ceremony was about to begin, but it would unfold in front of an audience of working people who had chosen to be there not because it was required, but because it felt right. Sarah looked around at her team and at the other workers who had gathered. She saw people from different departments, different backgrounds, different countries of origin, all united in their desire to show respect for someone they had never met, but whose sacrifice they understood instinctively. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting everything in sharp relief against the gray concrete of the tarmac. The Royal Guard stood ready. The family waited with quiet dignity, and dozens of airport workers formed an unplanned but heartfelt audience around the edges of Gate 12. In a few minutes, the ceremony would begin, and everyone present would witness something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. None of them knew that they were about to be part of a moment that would redefine their understanding of respect, honor, and the bonds that connect people across all boundaries of job title, social class, and background. The unexpected had already happened. Airport workers had interrupted their normal duties to honor a fallen soldier. But what would follow would be even more unexpected, and it would transform a formal military ceremony into something much deeper and more meaningful than anyone could have anticipated.